What if I told you that one of gospel music's most puzzling disappearances has nothing to do with scandal, betrayal, or controversy, but everything to do with something far more profound that most of us struggle with every single day? Before we dive into what really happened between Rory Feek and the legendary Gaither Vocal Band, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't just another story about a musician leaving the stage. This is about a man who chose to redefine what ministry looks like when the cameras stop rolling, when the applause fades, and when life forces you to ask yourself the hardest question of all: what does faithfulness really mean when nobody's watching? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why Rory's quiet exit from the spotlight might be one of the most powerful testimonies in modern gospel music, and why the rumors you've heard couldn't be further from the truth. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2016. And the gospel music world is watching one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful love stories unfold in real time. Joey Feek, one half of the beloved duo Joey plus Rory, is in her final days battling terminal cancer. Her husband Rory is documenting their journey with raw, unfiltered honesty on his blog, This Life I Live. Millions are reading, weeping, praying, and watching as this couple demonstrate what it means to face death with dignity, faith, and unwavering love. But here's what most people don't realize. While that chapter was closing, another one was quietly beginning, and it would eventually lead to one of the most misunderstood decisions in contemporary gospel music. The whisper started slowly at first. People noticed Rory wasn't showing up at Gaither homecoming events anymore. Then someone asked online, whatever happened to Rory Feek and the Gaither connection? Then another person chimed in with speculation. Before long, the internet did what it does best, filling in the blanks with drama that never existed. But the truth, as you're about to discover, is so much more meaningful than any rumor could ever be. Now, before we unpack what really happened, we need to understand who Rory Feek actually is, because this man's story goes far deeper than most people realize. Born and raised in rural Kansas, Rory Lee Feek didn't start out as a gospel singer. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, a man who served his country with honor before he ever stepped onto a stage. That military discipline and that sense of duty would later shape everything about how he approached his faith, his family, and his ministry. But Rory's real gift was storytelling through song. Long before Joey came into his life, Rory was already making waves in Nashville as a songwriter. We're talking about a man who penned hits for some of country music's biggest names. He wrote Some Beach for Blake Shelton, which became a #1 hit. He co-wrote A Little More Country Than That for Easton Corbin. This wasn't just a guy strumming a guitar in his garage. This was a professional craftsman who understood how to weave emotion, faith, and everyday life into 3-minute masterpieces that made people feel something real. Then Joey Martin walked into his life, and everything changed. Here's what makes their story so compelling. Joey and Rory weren't just musical partners. They were soulmates who found each other later in life, both carrying their own scars and stories. When they formed Joey plus Rory in 2008, they brought something refreshingly authentic to the music industry. At a time when country music was getting more polished and produced, Joey and Rory went the opposite direction. They embraced simplicity, authenticity, and deep spiritual roots. Their music was a blend of gospel, bluegrass, and classic country, all wrapped in an unmistakable reverence for God and family values. But what set them apart wasn't just their sound, it was their story. They didn't hide their struggles. They didn't pretend to have it all figured out. They sang from a place of genuine faith, acknowledging doubt, celebrate grace, and pointing people towards something bigger than themselves. And the world noticed. Their breakthrough came with the CMT competition, Can You Duet?, where they finished third, but won something far more valuable: a devoted fan base who connected with their sincerity. Album after album, they delivered songs that felt like prayers set to music. When I'm Gone, If I Needed You, That's Important to Me. These weren't just performances. These were testimonies. Now here's where the Gaither connection becomes absolutely critical to understanding the whole story. Bill Gaither, the legendary patriarch of Southern gospel music, built an empire, not on hype or marketing gimmicks, but on recognizing genuine spiritual talent. Through the Gaither Homecoming series, Bill created a platform where gospel artists could share their gifts in an atmosphere of warmth, fellowship, and authentic worship. When Bill Gaither discovered Joey and Rory, he didn't just see two talented singers. He saw two people whose ministry aligned perfectly with everything the Gaither family represented. The Gaither Music Group signed them, and suddenly Joey and Rory's music was reaching an audience that might never have discovered them otherwise. Their album Hymns That Are Important to Us wasn't just another gospel record. It was a collection of timeless hymns sung with such heartfelt simplicity that it shot to the top of the charts. Think about that for a moment. In an era dominated by contemporary Christian music with its arena rock production and hip-hop influences, here were two people singing century-old hymns with just their voices and simple instrumentation. And people couldn't get enough of it. Their appearances on Gaither Homecoming videos became moments of pure, unfiltered worship. When Joey sang softly and tenderly, you could hear heaven leaning in. When they performed in the garden, it wasn't a performance. It was an invitation to sit with Jesus in the cool of the day. Bill Gaither recognized what many in the modern Christian music industry had forgotten. People are starving for authenticity. They're exhausted by overproduction and empty showmanship. They want to feel something real, and Joey and Rory delivered that in spades. The partnership between Joey plus Rory and the Gaither organization was built on mutual respect, shared values, and a common mission to point people toward Christ through music. Gaither gave them a platform, but more importantly, he gave them a spiritual home within the broader gospel music community. They weren't just artists on a label. They were family. And that's precisely why the speculation about Rory's later absence was so painful for those who knew the truth. But then came 2014 and everything changed. Joey was diagnosed with cervical cancer. For anyone who followed their journey, what happened next was both devastating and inspiring. Joey and Rory could have retreated into privacy. They could have hidden the pain, kept up appearances, and dealt with their suffering behind closed doors. Instead, Rory made a choice that would impact millions. He started documenting their journey with brutal honesty on his blog. He wrote about the doctor visits, the treatment decisions, the moments of hope, and the crushing disappointments. He wrote about their faith being tested, about their daughter Indiana, who has Down syndrome, about the precious ordinariness of farm life continuing even as death approached. And people around the world were transfixed. Here was a couple living out their faith not in abstract theological terms, but in the messy, painful, beautiful reality of suffering. They weren't giving pat answers or pretending everything was fine. They were clinging to Jesus while admitting how hard it was to do so. The hymns they had sung for years suddenly took on profound new meaning. When Joey sang, "It is well with my soul," everyone listening knew she was singing it from a place of genuine suffering, not just as a nice melody. In February 2016, after fighting with incredible courage, Rory Feek passed away. The gospel music community mourned. The Gaither family mourned. Millions of people who had never met Joey personally mourned because they felt like they knew her through Rory's words and through their music. Rory was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life, raising Indiana alone, managing the farm, and trying to figure out what comes next when your ministry partner, your best friend, and your soulmate is gone. And this is the moment, right here, where most people completely misunderstand what happened next. They saw Rory step back from public appearances. They noticed he wasn't at Gaither events anymore. And human nature being what it is, people started filling in the blanks. Was there a disagreement with Bill Gaither? Did Rory become disillusioned with the gospel music industry? Did the Gaither organization somehow mistreat him after Joey's death? Let me be crystal clear about something right now. And I cannot emphasize this enough, there was no falling out. There was no controversy. There was no betrayal or conflict or dramatic exit. The real story is so much simpler and so much more profound than any of that manufactured drama. What actually happened was this. Rory Feek experienced what spiritual directors call a dark night of the soul. After Joey died, Rory entered a period of deep grief, certainly, but also deep spiritual questioning and transformation. He had to ask himself hard questions about identity, purpose, and calling. For years, his ministry had been intertwined with Joey, their voices together, their story together, their witness together. Now she was gone, and he had to figure out what his ministry looked like as a single father, as a widower, as a man trying to honor Joey's memory while also finding his own path forward. In that season of grief and questioning, Rory made a decision that goes against everything our celebrity-obsessed culture tells us about success and significance. He chose obscurity over fame. He chose the quiet faithfulness of daily life over the applause of crowds. He chose to minister through simple living, rather than through spectacular performances. And here's the part that's so easy to miss but so incredibly important. This wasn't a rejection of the Gaither family or the gospel music community. It was an embrace of a different kind of calling. Think about it this way. Ministry doesn't have a one-size-fits-all blueprint. The Apostle Paul traveled the ancient world planting churches, but Mary sat at Jesus' feet while her sister Martha worked. Both were serving God in the way they were called to serve. Some people are called to the big stage, the bright lights, the massive platforms. Others are called to the quiet work of daily faithfulness that nobody sees except God. After Joey's death, Rory discerned that his calling had shifted. He wasn't meant to be on tour buses and concert stages anymore. He was meant to be at Hardison Mill, their farm in Columbia, Tennessee, raising Indiana with intentionality, creating a home filled with peace rather than performance pressure, and ministering through presence rather than presentation. He continued writing on his blog, sharing honest reflections about grief, single parenting, and faith. He created documentaries and films like To Joey, with Love, that chronicled their journey and testified to God's faithfulness even in the valley of the shadow of death. He built a small chapel on the farm where he occasionally leads intimate worship gatherings, not for crowds of thousands, but for handfuls of people seeking authentic connection with God. Now here's where we need to address the elephant in the room, because some people have taken Rory's honest reflections about his spiritual journey and twisted them into something they're not. In the years since Joey's death, Rory has written candidly about struggling with loneliness, about moments of doubt, about feeling disconnected from organized religion at times, about questioning certain aspects of faith that he once took for granted. Some people read these reflections and assumed he was criticizing the gospel music industry or specifically the Gaither organization. But that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what Rory has been doing. When Rory writes about struggling with church attendance or wrestling with theological questions, he's not throwing stones at anyone. He's processing his grief and his faith in public the same way he did when Joey was sick. He's being honest about the fact that following Jesus doesn't mean you have all the answers or that you never struggle. In fact, if you actually read Rory's blog posts and watch his YouTube videos carefully, you'll notice he consistently speaks about the Gaither family with gratitude and respect. In a 2017 interview, he explicitly said that he and Joey were warmly welcomed into the Gaither family, and that he would always be deeply thankful for what Bill Gaither did for their ministry. The confusion arises because Rory refuses to sugarcoat his spiritual journey. He talks about feeling distant from God sometimes. He admits that worship songs that once brought comfort now sometimes feel hollow in his grief. He's honest about the fact that well-meaning Christian platitudes often miss the mark when you're in the depths of suffering. But none of that is an attack on the Gaither organization or anyone else. It's simply a grieving man working out his faith with fear and trembling, as Scripture itself encourages us to do. And actually, this kind of honesty is precisely what drew people to Joey and Rory in the first place. They never pretended to be perfect. They never acted like faith was easy. They sang hymns about God's faithfulness while admitting they didn't always feel it. And that transparency is what made their ministry so powerful. Rory hasn't abandoned that approach. He's actually leaned into it even more deeply. So let's tackle the big question directly. Was Rory Feek ever actually a member of the Gaither Vocal Band? And the answer is definitively no. This is one of those persistent misconceptions that just won't die, but it needs to be cleared up. The Gaither Vocal Band is a specific group, a male quartet with a rotating but carefully curated lineup that had included legendary voices like David Phelps, Guy Penrod, Mark Lowry, Wes Hampton, and others over the years. Rory was never a member of that group. Not officially, not unofficially, not even close. What Rory and Joey did was partner with the Gaither Music Group, which is the label and production company. They appeared on Gaither homecoming videos as featured guests, the same way dozens of other artists have over the years. After Joey's death, Rory made some additional solo appearances on homecoming specials, sharing his story and leading worship, but he was never in the vocal band itself. The confusion probably stems from the fact that the Gaither brand is so interconnected. When you see someone on a Gaither video, it's easy to assume they're part of the vocal band, but that's not how it works. The Homecoming series is more like a family reunion, where lots of different artists come together to celebrate gospel music. Joey and Rory were honored guests at that reunion, but they weren't permanent fixtures in the core group. Understanding this distinction is important because it helps clarify why there was never any dramatic exit from the Gaither Vocal Band. You can't exit something you were never part of to begin with. What Rory did was gradually step back from public appearances in general, include Gaither events, as he entered his season of private grief and healing. And here's something beautiful that often gets overlooked in all the speculation. Bill Gaither and the Gaither organization never pressured Rory to keep performing. They never demanded that he maintain a certain level of public presence. They respected his need to step away and grieve and figure out what comes next. That tells you everything you need to know about the relationship between Rory and the Gaither family. If there had been conflict or business disputes, there would have been pressure to lawyers, public statements. Instead, there was grace, space, and understanding. The Gaither organization continued to distribute Joey and Rory's music, keeping their legacy alive for new audience to discover, while also giving Rory the freedom to pursue whatever path God was calling him toward. That's not the behavior of people in conflict. That's the behavior of a spiritual family supporting one of their own through an impossibly difficult season. Now let's talk about what Rory is actually doing today, because this is where his story becomes not just interesting, but genuinely instructive for anyone trying to figure out what faithful living looks like in the modern world. Rory still lives at Hardison Mill, the farm in Tennessee that he and Joey restored together. It's not just a house. It's a working farm where Rory raises cattle, grows food, and lives out a vision of intentional simplicity that runs completely counter to our consumption-driven culture. He's raising Indiana, who is now a preteen, in an environment deliberately designed to be slow, peaceful, and grounded in faith and nature. He homeschools her using what he calls a one-room schoolhouse approach, emphasizing practical skill, creativity, and character formation over standardized testing and academic competition. He writes regularly on his blog and creates content for his YouTube channel, but it is not the carefully curated, sponsor-driven content you see from most influencers. It's honest reflections about faith, grief, farming, and fatherhood. Sometimes he shares wisdom, sometimes he shares confusion, sometimes he just shares what he cooked for dinner. He occasionally performs at small, intimate gatherings, usually churches or private events where he can connect directly with people without the machinery of the music industry getting in the way. These aren't concerts in the traditional sense. They're more like campfire sing-alongs where Rory shares stories, leads hymns, and creates space for people to process their own grief and faith journeys. He's written books that have become quietly influential among people navigating loss, include Once Upon a Farm and others that chronicle his journey with Joey and beyond. He's created films and documentaries that preserve Joey's legacy while also pointing people toward the hope that sustained them through their darkest days. And here's what's so powerful about all of this. Rory has redefined what it means to have a ministry in the digital age. He's not trying to build a massive platform or become the next big thing. He's simply being faithful in the ordinary moments, and through modern technology, people all over the world get to witness that faithfulness and be encouraged by it. He's proving that you don't need a record deal or a tour schedule, or a spot on the Gaither homecoming stage to have a meaningful impact for the kingdom of God. What Rory has done, perhaps without even fully realizing it, is model something that the church desperately needs to see: the ministry of presence over performance. We live in an age where everyone is trying to build a brand, grow a following, and make a name for themselves. Even in Christian circles, there's this subtle pressure to be seen, to be known, to have influence and impact in measurable ways. But what Rory is demonstrating is that sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is shrink your life down to what matters most: loving the people in front of you, doing the work God has given you to do, and trusting that He'll take care of the rest. Rory's not trying to be famous, he's trying to be faithful. And in a culture addicted to celebrity, that's a revolutionary act. The metrics of success in God's economy are completely different from the metrics of success in our economy. The world measures by numbers: album sales, concert attendance, social media followers, brand partnerships. God measures by faithfulness. Did you love well? Did you tell the truth? Did you point people toward me? Did you steward what I gave you with integrity? By that measure, Rory's quiet life at Hardison Mill is just as much a ministry, if not more so, than any stadium tour could ever be.